Hello there. Have any of you ever wondered about that title sequence, what I'm standing in front of and where I am? Well, this little short video is going to be all about that. And it's also going to feature my brother Si, who is a photographer and also a drone pilot and an all-round excellent chap. Stones. This is the United Kingdom from space, and the bit at the far southwest end of it, marked in red here, is Cornwall, where I grew up. It's surrounded by the sea on three sides, so there are lots of picturesque little fishing villages and lots of lovely beaches. There's also some wonderful landmarks like St Michael's Mount, a castle built on an island that I used to be able to see from my bedroom window as a kid. And then there's also places like Tintagel in North Cornwall, where supposedly the legendary King Arthur lived. Cornwall's full of myths and legends, and there's also lots of ancient ceremonies and festivals, such as the Mên-an-Tol festival in Penzance, the Carwynnen festival, or Flora Day in Helston, with the Hallan Tower kind of mumming play where St George beats the dragon and St Michael defeats the devil. And of course the extraordinary Padstow Obios. But there's also lots of open heath and moorland, and it's in these places that you find really strange ancient monuments like this one, the Mên-an-Tol. No one's really sure what the Mên-an-Tol is or what it's for. It may be that the whole stone itself, which is what the word Mên-an-Tol in the old Cornish language means, was an entrance to a grave or a barrow or whatever. But there's lots of myths surrounding it, such as if you crawl backwards through it 7 times, it'll cure you of rickets, and women climbing through it are supposed to get pregnant within a year. But as I say, no one really knows what it's for. And there's lots of other Neolithic. And I say Neolithic because these are late Stone Age. This is like 5,000 years ago. There's lots of these things dotted all over the landscape. Now this is something you'll recognise. This is the title sequence from my Colganology videos. And this object is called Lanyon Quoit. It's not far from the Mên-an-Tol. And it's a cromlech or a dolmen, although they call them quoits in Cornwall. And it's basically a series of upright stones and then a big heavy capstone sat on the top like a tabletop. Again, no one's entirely sure what they're for. It's believed that maybe there was originally a mound of earth there and the upright stones formed kind of the inner walls of a chamber, like a burial chamber, and the capstone went on top. But again, no one's entirely sure. And there's no one we can ask, because the Celts, who were the dominant race living in Cornwall at the time these were built 5,000 years ago, had no written language. And so all that's left to us is myth and legend, really. And of course, a lot of those myths are involving giants building these things. But they were always placed in extraordinarily bleak locations, like in the middle of moorlands somewhere. I mean, my brother Si here is now operating his drone and going up fairly high, so you get a good view of the landscape here. And you can see that apart from the modern road that's there now, there's nothing there but moorland. Nothing at all. There was obviously something special about these places. Oh look, you can see St Michael's Mount. Top left there, you can just see the little island there. There's obviously something special about these places, these open moorlands to our ancestors. Quite what was special to them, I don't know. I mean, yes, they would have had their cattle out here, they would have had their villages built in some of these places, and maybe it's because it's the high ground and they could see enemies coming from all directions. But people don't often realise, when they see all these picturesque fishing villages in Cornwall, they don't realise that an awful lot of Cornwall looks like this. It's really quite bleak. But it's a beautiful bleakness that you always get with moorlands. And sure enough, as I say, there's some extraordinary things to be seen. So let's now leave this little bit of Cornwall, this little bit which is known as Madron, and it's down near Penzance, and let's go and look at another quoit elsewhere. You find me at another quoit, another dolmen. This is Carwynnen Quoit, also known as the Giant's Quoit, near Camborne. And this was a pile of stones for many, many, many years in a farm field, until archaeologists looked on the underside of the capstone, a bit on the top, and found some indentations that show that it had been sitting on a set of uprights. So about 10 years ago, they re-erected it. And there you go, Carwynnen Quoit. But not all monuments in Cornwall are that ancient. The country, and Cornwall was a country, it was its own country for a very, very long time, and had its own language. The Cornish language was actually still spoken, albeit English had actually started taking over as the primary language, but Cornish was still spoken by people up until the late 1700s. And one of my language teachers at school told me that he could remember fishermen still counting in Cornish way into the 1930s. But as I said, it was an ancient kingdom. It was a country in its own right. And the reason it retained its independence for so long is because it had huge deposits of tin, copper and gold. And the result was that people didn't want to upset the miners. In fact, they had their own parliament, a thing called the Stannary Parliament, for a long time, which reported to the king and was left to govern all of the control of the tin and the copper. And if you think about it, tin and copper together make bronze. And in the Bronze Age, this was hugely important. So Cornwall is absolutely covered in the derelict remains of old tin, copper and gold mines. And they are quite extraordinary buildings. I mean, they're beautiful in their own right. And a lot of them have now been made safe by English Heritage and by other Cornish-based historical societies. So you can now walk around them without fear of falling down a mine shaft or anything like that. And Si went out with his drone a little while ago, about a year and a half ago, and took some of this extraordinary footage around one particular area called the Great Flat Lode near Camborne. And again, Camborne and Redruth, those two towns, were at one time one of the richest places in England because of the amount of stuff that was coming out of the ground. Anyway, enough of my blether. Enjoy some of Si's aerial photography. So there you go, a brief whistle-stop tour of some of the places around which I grew up in Cornwall. We've only scratched the surface. We really only have scratched the surface with just 2 or 3 sites there. There's so many more things I've got to show you. And in fact, I'll be down in Cornwall later on this year and I'll get some more video and post some more video on this channel. But it might go some way to explain the sort of person I am, why I have such an interest in folklore and folk history, why I have such an interest in my own Cornish heritage. And it is a long heritage, certainly on my mother's side of the family. It goes back to the Domesday Book, and it's mostly farmers, mostly Cornish farmers. My mother grew up on a farm. On my dad's side, they're mostly seafarers. But again, it's a long lineage, particularly on my dad's mother's side, to do with Cornwall. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that indeed. And even though I'm not living there at the moment, I may again one day, it doesn't stop me thinking of Cornwall as home. Well, that's it for this little video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been informative. Si's photography is extraordinary. I mean, he's an amazing photographer, and he particularly specialises in vintage cameras. He does things with old bellows cameras, Victorian and Georgian cameras, you know, that... Georgian, is that too old? Edwardian, maybe. And he can print things on tin types and glass negatives and all that sort of thing. In fact, here's a photographic portrait he did of the two of us, which I absolutely love. It looks like some still from a folk horror novel. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you soon. So, Toodle-pip. If you've enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing. Or click on some of these links to look at some of the other videos on the channel. Or press the like button. Or leave a comment. It would be lovely to hear from you. Any combination of those 4 things would be wonderful. Thank you very much.